Hey everybody, welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com. Hey brothers, welcome to another podcast episode. We are in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam, and we've got a great show for you today. We're going to be talking about language learning, as well as your normal dose of travel hacking, plus a review of one of our favorite new products. We're going to talk a little bit about the GoPro Silver Edition. How you liking Ho Chi Minh, man?
Man, I really like it. It's definitely pleasantly surprised. I heard really good things, but really big city, super modern, great nightlife, good dining, just really good vibe in general. It's a huge city. It's one of the bigger cities in the world. All the lists are different, but it'd be in the top 30, I think. I think the metro area's got like 10 million people, so there's plenty of stuff going on.
It's got to have one of the best motorcycle populations in the world.
Yeah, I actually heard a stat on that last year. It was actually Andy and Evan. They were doing some videos in Vietnam, and I want to say the stat was something like there's like 6 or 7 million motorbikes in the see, and the population is like 6 million people.
We're going to try and stay alive for you guys. We got a lot of important stuff to talk about coming up, so we're going to try and be real careful doing extra head checks in the roundabouts. Definitely a little high stress. So, did you learn any Vietnamese today?
Today I didn't, no. I didn't learn any Vietnamese today.
Man, that's good.
Learned a little bit a couple nights ago from that crazy lady feeding me ice cream.
Oh yeah, we should get a video posted of that. That was one of the highlights of my week so far.
Yeah. How about you? You picked up some Vietnamese today, didn't you?
I did. Met a girl last night and got a little private Vietnamese lesson today. Pretty cool, just like she actually today, the most interesting thing, we're going to talk about tonal language later on in the show, but she was able to break it down for me, and it just goes to show if you can connect with locals, they're going to make it so much easier to learn what you want to learn. So definitely cool. So today we're going to talk about language learning. We want to break it down into two parts. The first one is kind of language hacking. You get off the plane, you don't understand anything. It's like you just showed up on a completely different planet. So these are the tools that we use when we didn't have time to prepare in advance and we're just trying to get as much value out of the experience of being someplace they speak another language. The second strategy is a lot more comprehensive. It's the pursuit of real communication. So it's what, it's learning a language is about investing in future relationships with the people that speak that language. And so the second approach is much more, how can you get to a point where you can communicate with people?
Didn't Mr. Nelson Mandela say something about talking to people in their native tongue?
To paraphrase, I think it's really true. If you speak to someone in a language they understand, it goes to their head. And if you speak to someone in their own language, it goes to their heart. I don't know if that's exactly what it was, but
that's it. I'm pretty sure.
Mandela's a pretty clever dude, and you get that reaction. So there's a couple of reasons to me that it's important to learn. The first one is actions speak louder than words. When someone sees that you've made an effort to learn their language, it can have a really big impact. When you don't speak anything, it's a signal that you've pretty much feel like everybody should adjust to you and speak English, despite the fact that they're the ones with the home court advantage, so to speak. And so most people outside the U.S. have tried to learn English at some point, or at least some other language, and they know how hard it is. So when they see you struggling and just trying to communicate, in most places that's going to earn you mad respect from the locals, probably going to help you pick up girls, and just generally help you have a cooler experience traveling.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with that.
All right, so let's kick off with a little real talk about the trip. 5 new languages. What was your favorite so far?
Thai has been my favorite so far, no surprise. Yeah, I thought it was going to be German or Czech, but to be honest, Czech was just, I don't know, it was really difficult, and I guess we weren't there long enough to learn enough. But I really like Thai. It's pretty cool. To give you a background on my language learning, I'm conversational in Spanish and Portuguese. And I think it's really cool to learn a language on the other side of the world. So the languages I know is all the Western Hemisphere stuff, Latin America, a little bit of Western Europe. And it's cool to kind of dive into a language from the Far East. Really fascinating, too, that it's a tonal language, which means a word could essentially, if you're thinking of it in English, book as a word could mean 2 different things by the way you say it. So you could be like book, or you could be like book. So that's really challenging, and that was interesting. And it's kind of fun to speak the language too, because you can kind of be over exaggerated in the way you say stuff and almost try to say it with their accent, and it actually ends up working out better.
Yeah, it's funny. It makes it much more musical. That was what I was saying. I learned this morning. So there's actually 6 in Vietnamese, and at least 3 of them I couldn't tell apart, even when she was like saying them over and over for me. So got a long ways to go, but it's interesting. There's a lot of words in English that there's no way to differentiate besides context. If you say to as in the number 2, to as in also, to go to a place, that's just all context. There. Tonal languages are like that, except they're giving you some clues by some sort of sing-song approach to saying the word. So lots to learn there, but it's super interesting.
Yeah, definitely been fascinating too. Another thing too I really appreciated about Thai was the numbers actually make sense. So as the numbers get bigger, you're essentially just adding the numbers together, like 3035, as opposed to just creating all these different tiers that are unnecessary, like we do in English.
Yeah, there's not the teens, and there's not the mess with the 20 and 30. It's just 25 is 25. It's that definitely was a relief when we had to learn those. All right, so I guess for me, probably the hardest has been Vietnamese. I love Thai. I felt like it was just easier to pronounce and a little bit easier to get a grasp on, especially considering that I studied for Vietnamese at least a couple of weeks before we left, and kind of have fallen flat on my face and ended up using more of the language hacking strategies when I thought I was going to be a little bit better prepped and more kind of in the language learning mode here. So let's talk about the kind of 5-step breakdown. We both start building an initial list. Talk about how you kind of select the stuff that you're going to go after early on when you don't have any background with the language.
My approach has changed. It's been kind of the new revelation that for me, all of my happiness and joy comes from navigating a city, which means understanding the public transit, the stops, how it works, or being able to properly negotiate with taxi drivers. And the reason I say specifically negotiating and talking with taxi drivers is because in Thailand, Bangkok in specific, we would show people maps at first. We'd show these cab drivers maps, and they'd look at us like we're idiots. And they didn't use maps. They just didn't do that. They didn't even understand the Roman alphabet. And so we finally figured out to give them neighborhoods and to give them street like addresses, like general addresses and crossroads, and anywhere in the city that could get you there. So my list is all based around doing a little bit of research on the different public transit stops if I'm in a more developed place with good infrastructure, or about just kind of getting the neighborhoods down, getting to the quadrants of the city if I'm in a place where I'm going to be cabbing around. And then there's the obvious, hi, hello, how are you? I'm sorry, please, thank you, excuse me, where is food, beer? The bare essentials. That's kind of where I start.
Yeah, there's 2 parts to that as well. One of you mentioned a couple of conversation starters there, and those are critical because it's a really good way to open up and talk to a local, to give yourself a chance to practice on a regular basis. It's great to know hi and how are you. Also, those are things that you're going to use over and over and over again. They're the highest frequency type phrases, and so it gives you a chance to really try and nail the pronunciation. You're going to say excuse me and I'm sorry a lot of times, and if you don't leave, by the time you get out of there, you should at least be able to say it more or less properly. Okay, so part 2, once you've got that list, the next step for me is to add to the list by learning something new from every person you meet. And it really doesn't matter how you write it down. I like pen and paper a lot because it's easier to write the pronunciation out with pen and paper. You can also use your iPhone. I've used the Notes app a little bit. I kind of go back and forth. What I really want is a way that Evernote is super slow on my phone for whatever reason, but it would be even better if you could take the pronunciation notes and then actually record the native speaker doing the audio. So maybe we can build an app for that at some point.
Yeah, it is important to record those words so you don't forget. There's a little story here where Erik and I were in Prague looking for the ATM. It was really frustrating. We needed money. We're about to head out. And we ended up finding a nice enough person that told us what it was, and they pointed it out to us. And we just kind of scurried over to the ATM, got our money, and left. And what we should have done is asked them, excuse me, can you please repeat that? And then we should have, phonetically written that down in a note in some way, shape, or form. So then the next time we needed to get some damn money, we could just ask somebody where the whatever it is. So definitely important to take notes on that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you gotta form the habit. It's really easy to you're focused on finding the ATM. So the first thing you do when you find out where it is go get your money, and you forget about recording. So the other thing, so really important to ask people to repeat. Your brain takes some shortcuts when you hear something in a language that's not familiar to you, and so a lot of times I find myself associating with a word that I think it sounds like in English. Maybe it's got like a ng sound, so I remember like, oh, it sounds like sing, which is good. It's a good way to start, but you want to make sure that you have the native speaker say it a couple of times when you're writing it down. And the classic example of where you see this come up is that it sounds like you're saying it right. They say it, you repeat it, you think you're doing it right, and they're just shaking their head like you're totally blowing this.
Yeah, that happened to me in Thailand quite a few times. I could have sworn that I was 95% accurate in the way that I was saying the word, and they're just laughing at me. I was saying an entirely different thing.
Yeah, so your brain betrays you a little bit. So does your mouth. The good thing that I always keep in the back of my head is you have the same speech organs as everybody else, and so unless you have like a serious speech impediment that makes it hard for you to say things in English, you can learn to make the sounds of any language. It's just a matter of practice. It takes time. There's stuff you're just not going to be able to say without having gone through it a couple thousand times. But that's why you create that frequency list. That's why you spend the time. So write it down phonetically as best as you can, whether you're doing it on paper or whatever else. And then it makes it possible to refer back to that and, continue to develop your skills while you're on the ground there.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about I find, the real language learning way more exciting. Like
when he says real language learning, he's talking about learning a language to become fluent or become conversational, not just about meal piecing together some simple phrases to get yourself around the city. Put yourself on the trajectory to continue to learn and kind of the building blocks.
Yeah, the distinction's about the ultimate goal. And it doesn't have to be fluent. We're big fans of the 80-20 principle. You want to, get your maximum return on investment. So your goal might be to just be able to have kind of not great grammatically, but just good conversations with people.
Yeah,
and that's an admirable thing to go for. But one way or another, you can't just use the language hacking stuff. If you want to be investing in future relationships with people that speak that language, you got to take a little bit deeper approach, and you got to do some prep work before you go travel to a new place if you really want to get on that trajectory. So talk a little bit about Portuguese. You and I both studied Spanish in college, or in high school for sure. Took some classes, had an academic run at it. You learned Portuguese a lot faster.
Yeah, I did. And I think it's pretty simple when you think about how my time is allocated. So I studied 4 years of Spanish in high school, and I studied, 2.5 years or so at university. And when I look back at university, the way that they taught, it just made no sense to me. All I wanted to do is speak Spanish, and I was learning all this crap about Spanish history or Mexican history or Guatemalan art, which, it's cool to be well-rounded and know that stuff. But if you're trying to learn a language, writing papers on 16th century Spain that's not the ticket at all. And especially the way that they grade you, where there's so much scrutiny for being grammatically correct. It's not really an environment that allows you to try new things and try new words. So I would end up just recycling my vocabulary into grammatically proper sentences, received really high marks, just kind of played the game. Now, where Portuguese, my grammar isn't perfect, but I've learned much faster because all the focus has been on speaking and speaking like the people in Brazil. My focus has been on Brazilian Portuguese. And I think, if you compare that to the traditional academic setting, you're going to see a much higher return if you focus on speaking, you focus on hearing, and you do it through things like music, movies, or actual conversations with locals.
Yeah, absolutely. I took it even a little bit further, ended up going for a minor in Spanish, and the Spanish that I have now is really messed up. It's an academic that my vocabulary is way bigger than my ability to use it. I just know all these words that are useless to me. And, it comes, the best way I can sum it up for you is that, when I want to ask somebody to go get food, in Spanish it comes out something like, hello, my friend, would you like to go to the restaurant and share a meal together? And in Portuguese, I've gotten to the point where it's just like, hey man, I'm hungry, let's go grab a bite, or something like that, something that people actually say. And so the difference in terms of how much fun it is and how much you're going to get to use it is huge. So We're going to talk now about kind of how you can get to that point. It's, there's definitely a time and place for the academic part, but you want to make sure you don't get trapped writing papers about, Spanish art history.
Yeah, and also remember, I mean, if you're learning a language, people are gonna be forgiving, man. If you say something that's not, complete proper, Portuguese grammatically speaking, I mean, they can hear your accent, they can tell that you're still learning, and all you have to do is just take note of those things and then just build upon it.
Yeah. Hey, so talk about the tools that you've used for kind of getting started with the long run approach to language.
The long run approach to language, I've used mainly music. You've kind of inspired me to do that. I saw how much you learned, or how fast you learned Portuguese, just listening to Seu Jorge and all the Brazilian great artists. And so, as far as even brushing up on my Spanish skills and trying to improve my Portuguese, music's played a big role in that. In my initial German learning, music played a role. Another tool that I think I'm going to continue to use if I'm doing French, German, Spanish, Portuguese, or Italian, and it's only because those are the only languages it's offered, is a website called Duolingo. It's a bit more formal. There's some written stuff, there's some reading stuff, but I think it's really good for building a vocabulary. It helped me, at least in German, remember kind of get a good base vocabulary. I don't know how it would work as far as once I become conversational in a language, but if I want to learn French or if I want to learn Italian, I think I'm going to start at Duolingo. And a really cool thing about the website is it's really well designed. It's a high performing website, and they gamify things. So it's all kind of a game. Like you get 3 lives to get through a certain level, and so they don't teach you new things until you prove competency at a certain level, and you only get to screw up a certain amount of times to kind of ensure you're not moving on too soon. So I think that's a pretty cool tool. It's Duolingo.com.
Awesome. Yeah, we can link over to that. So the one that I really like, it's probably not as fun as Duolingo, but it is a really good way to get a head start, is Pimsleur. Or actually, there's a lot of other ones that are sort of language learning CDs that drill the basic vocabulary. First of all, a lot of this stuff, Rosetta Stone, it can be really expensive. And so with Pimsleur, you can typically pick up, the introductory course at the public library for free for pretty much any major language. It's great exposure to native speakers. It's a good structure of new material plus review of stuff that you were supposed to have learned in previous lessons. And, 10 lessons will give you a huge head start on pronunciation. So it's definitely worth checking out. Also kind of cool. They're a little bit nerdy, but Pimsleur's trying to get you laid. There's always in the first couple of lessons, there's something about like asking the young lady whether she would like to have a drink at your place, or, catching her response that maybe it would be better to have the drink at her place. So they're at least giving you some of the tools you need to succeed. Bottom line, you're probably going to get bored of that relatively soon, so start with Pimsleur or something similar, and then move on to other media. Grab some movies or music, whatever you can do, because the stuff that you actually use and practice on a regular basis is way better than the stuff you don't use, no matter how quality the language learning stuff is. You gotta do it regularly.
Yeah, and something Erik pointed out to me why learning from music is so important is you just think of any of the lyrics of your favorite songs. It's all common vocabulary. It's really conversational vocabulary. It's the kind of stuff that you would actually say to somebody else in real life and express yourself and understand somebody else and where they're coming from. So that's really cool. In music, there's always a different beat. There's always different notes in the song, and so it's a good change of pace. 3 to 4 minutes.
Cool. All right, so we've been getting some killer footage on this trip. Got to sort of admit, we wanted to review this product so we can show you some sweet videos. Talk about the GoPro, man.
Yeah, man. So we got the GoPro Hero 3 Silver Edition. Quite simply, it's pretty sweet. If we did the whole star ratings thing, I would give it 5 stars. I really would. So it takes a great picture. It's really high quality video. It takes really high quality photos as well. And there's really cool features like you can do time lapse, all sorts of stuff. There's really great editing software. And another thing I really like about it is it's tiny, so it's easy to transport. It's not an operation getting the camera on site. You can literally put it in your pocket. There's 2 other things I really like about it. One is the iPhone app, and that allows you to preview what you're actually filming from your phone without a connection. And it does that because the GoPro has its own Wi-Fi router, so your phone can connect to the camera's own connection. And you can get to preview, and you get to start and stop the recording. And the second thing is there's a huge secondary market for add-ons, helmet cams, straps, tripods, all sorts of really cool add-ons, and they're pretty affordable in like the $10 to $30 spot. So I'd say if you're willing to front $200 or $300 to document travel, if you travel quite a bit, it's definitely well worth it. Good value.
Very cool. Yeah, the only drawback I have noticed so far is the microphone's not really good when you've got it in the case, especially the waterproof one. So we're gonna have to check out those add-ons, see if we can find something that gets a little better sound. But other than that, the video's lights out. So been really happy with it so far. Next, let's get a travel hacking tip here. We want you guys to get out into the world and check out some awesome new places. Report back to us. So. You probably know one of the biggest ways that AJ and I fund our travel hacking is by signing up for credit cards that have big bonuses of frequent flyer miles. And so when you make an application, the bank is going to take a look at your income, your job history, and what's called your FICO score. FICO score has 5 categories that influence it, and the 3 most important ones make up 80%. So we're just going to cover those today. That's payment history, amounts owed, and age of accounts. Payment history is 35% of the FICO score. It's really straightforward. You got to pay your bills on time. Banks, first and foremost, want to know that there's a very good chance that you're going to pay the money you owe them. So always make your payments on time, make them in full so you avoid interest. Second one is amounts owed. Basically what that means, it's 2 parts. One of it is all of your debts. So if you've got a mortgage or a student loan or a car payment, that's going to be part of that section. But the part you can control is the amounts owed on your credit cards. And the way that this works, let's say you have a total of $10,000 credit extended to you. That's your overall limit. You want to spend less than $3,000 or 30% of that total. If somebody gets really close to their actual credit limit, the banks look at that and think that they're maybe out of control, that they're going to be losing, they might not be able to repay it. So keep it under 30%, and it can have up to a 10-point impact on your FICO score, which can be the difference between getting approved and denied. The last one is your age of accounts. That's 15%. And for age of accounts, just the longer your credit history, the better. So you want to keep old accounts open. Banks look at 3 factors. They look at your newest account, your average age of accounts, and your oldest account. So you want to keep the old ones open. That anchors your average score and makes it a lot easier to be able to get new cards. So that's it for the travel hacking this week. We're going to be back with more info next week on that.
Yeah, I got one more thing for you guys. This is some breaking news. We're on the web right now. You need to go to abroaders.com, and you really need to give us your email address because we've just got our website updated so we can actually take your email address, get you on the list, and pump awesome information to you twice a month. So go sign up.
Sounds good. All right. Well, wherever you are in the world, your life would definitely be better with some music. We're going to play you out with the International Jam of the Week. This one is not a new song by any means, but recently came on my radar when we were staying at the Indigo Tree in Bali, Indonesia. Owner of that place had a playlist of complete jams. This is one of the ones I could not get out of my head. The XX is an indie pop group hailing from London, England, the United Kingdom. This is Crystallize. We'll see you next week. Brothers, don't be shy. The best part of our day is connecting with you. Send your show feedback, comments, or questions to Erik or AJ at abroaders.com. You can also leave us an audio note right on the website and maybe even get yourself featured on the next episode of the Abroaders podcast.
I'll forgive and forget before I'm paranoid.